is Ronald White, and I'm an alcoholic. Let's get the important stuff out of the way. My name is not Ralph. And some people are laughing at that because they understand. Most of them have walked up to me this weekend and asked me, aren't you Ralph? Just in case you don't know, I want you to know the committee is not recycling speakers and giving them different names. I have a brother who is sober in Alcoholics Anonymous named Ralph. And Ralph spoke at this convention, I believe, last year. And, people have been coming up to me and they were looking at me wondering why I didn't recognize them or interact with them. And I've always suffered from following in his footsteps. He's a year older than me, even though I'm 88 days more sober than him. Make sure that's on the tape so he can hear it. All right, so we got that out of the way. All right, now I want to thank the committee for giving me the honor and privilege of being able to come and share with you guys. It's always a special honor for me to be able to speak at the fellowship that literally saved my life. And I'm going to try to tell you some things about myself this morning that I hope you won't hold against me, that I hope that may prove to be helpful to somebody who is sitting in this room, if nobody else, hopefully to me. There's a chapter in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, chapter 7. It's a chapter entitled Working with Others. It's a chapter that's entirely devoted to our 12th step of recovery. The 12th step says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics, to practice these principles in all our affairs. And in that chapter, it details how I'm supposed to share with the new man or woman what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like today. It's quite fashionable to go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous nowadays and hear people say, I'm not going to stay in no drunk-a-log. We all know how to drink. I want to get into the steps, to the work, the process. I want to talk about how those 12 steps have given me the spiritual awakening. And I think that it is vital that I share about the steps because that is our program of recovery. But I think that it's even more important for me to share with you what I used to be like. Because there is something that happens when one alcoholic shares with another that don't happen when nobody else tries to share with us. And I need to tell you this. There's somebody sitting in this room this morning looking at Ronald White, and I think I look kind of nice. I'm going to describe it for the people on the tape. He's wearing a beautiful blue suit with a light blue silk shirt with a beautiful matching tie. His shoes are matching one another. He's about 6'2" with long blonde hair. Oh, I went too far. I'm like a typical alcoholic, right? But there is somebody who is sitting in this room this morning looking at me and saying that I am not like him. Look at him. He looks pretty nice. His eyes are shining. He's smiling. He's laughing. They ask him to speak. He must be special. There is something about him that is different than me. Maybe I can't get what he has. Maybe I can't be at that place where people are thanking me for being somewhere. Maybe I just don't have what it takes to be a successful member of Alcoholics Anonymous, whatever that means. And I need to let you know that when I arrived on the doorstep of Alcoholics Anonymous, I did not look the way that I look this morning. I didn't sound the way that I sound. I did not smell the way that I smell. I need to describe to you my first day of sobriety. July the 14th, 1986, a Monday morning. I'm standing in the lobby of a joint called the Harbor Light Center. It's a place run by the Salvation Army, and it's located on we in Los Angeles called the Nickel, 5th Street, Skid Row. The Salvation Army Harbor Light Center is an all-men's alcoholic recovery facility, housing 150 beds for alcoholic men. I'm standing in the lobby being interviewed, and I don't mean no job interview, y'all. I'm talking about one of those intake interviews they're doing to see if they're going to give you one of those beds. And there's this old black guy named George. He's wearing a rumpled brown suit with a fedora tilted kind of rakishly on his head. And he's got this folder in front of him where he's got those questions. You know, those complex questions they ask us to see if you're going to get a bed. Mr. White, how much do you drink? And he says, how often do you drink? And he's asking me these questions, you know, and I'm mumbling my answers to the questions as I'm looking down at these dirty, run-over, holy tennis shoes that I'm wearing. I'm looking at the tennis shoes, you guys, because it felt as if my chin were stapled to my chest, because I was so ashamed of being there that I could not even look him in the eye. I'm mumbling these answers to these questions, and my eyes rose up from those tennis shoes, and they came along these gray corduroy pants that I'm wearing. And the pants are real dirty and dusty because I've been wearing them for 4 or 5 days on a run. If I had hit the pants too hard, a cloud of smoke would have filled up the lobby. And the pants were kind of like hanging off of me. You know, it wasn't fitting nicely on me like the suit is this morning. They were kind of, I don't know if you in Florida have the youngsters that have this style of dress nowadays. We call it sagging, right? Where they have their pants almost around their ankles and stuff. And they, on purpose, right? You know, and showing the underwear and stuff. Well, I need to tell you that that wasn't the style back in '86. And I was not a youngster. I was 31 years old. Except I'm an alcoholic. When I drink, I don't eat. So imagine me 40 or 50 pounds lighter than I am this morning. I'm a small guy anyway. Drop 40 off of me, I look like a skeleton. Cheeks were sunk in, my eyes were popping out my head. I had a big black trench coat on because I didn't want you to see how malnourished I'd become. So I wore this coat everywhere that I went. And I'm telling you, it was July in Los Angeles. I know it gets hot here. It gets hot in LA too. So imagine me walking around with this top coat on everywhere that I went. And I'm not talking about no nice London fog or no cashmere or nothing like that. I'm talking about one of those seedy Chester the Molester looking coats, right? Right? You know, I had a baseball cap pulled tightly over my hair because by now I have no personal hygiene. I've stopped bathing. I've stopped combing my hair. So my hair is all matted. So I wore a baseball cap everywhere that I went. If you see photographs of me in my first 2 years of sobriety, my hair grew lopsided because I could not even grow hair on the sides from these indentations the baseball cap had put in there from years of wearing it. I had these big black plastic, we call them county rim glasses on, the kind you get when you're on welfare, when you're on the county. And I had them taped together by a big glob of white tape, holding them together on the side because a guy had pistol whipped me a couple of months before for not following directions. And I was too busy to get them fixed. And if you had smelled me that morning, the stench, you know, the smell that the drunk has on them when you haven't bathed for weeks and it's coming out your pores, and you have the same underwear that you've been wearing for weeks and it's black and caked around, you almost have to. You know, some of you guys know what I'm talking about. No, wait a minute. Don't let me discriminate. Some of you women know what I'm talking about, too. If you were wearing underwear. But I won't go there, okay? I'll take my own inventory. If you get the opportunity at the conclusion of this meeting to shake my hand or give me a hug, I want you to take a whiff. I have a fine little fragrance on this morning, something by Sean John called Unforgivable. Right. I smelled unforgivable that morning, the Harbor Light Center. And I was not laughing about my condition that morning. There was nothing funny about the way that I felt as I stood in that lobby, hoping desperately that they would give me a bed. I never had any dreams nor aspirations about growing up and at age 31 standing in the Harbor Light Center begging them for a bed. It wasn't one of the top 10 goals of my life to grow up to be a drunk. In fact, quite the opposite. I thought that I would never grow up to be an alcoholic because, you see, the first resentment I grew up with as a child was against my father because my father was an alcoholic. And I swore I would never grow up to be like him. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles in the middle of a small, little, quiet suburban area called Watts. Oh, okay. I guess some of you guys have heard about it. Probably one of the toughest little sections of the country at the time. I grew up in the 50s and in the 60s. As I grew up in this little 2-bedroom apartment on 108th and Central in the middle of Watts, my mother and father raised 6 boys in that family. There was Willie, Ralph, Ronald, Reggie, Ricky, and Rod. My father's name was Ralph. My father would get paid every Thursday or Friday night, and when he would get paid, he had to make a stop up the corner at the pool hall, and he never seemed to be able to make it home until Sunday. When he made it home, he was always broke. When he dragged his ass home, my mother would confront him at the door and she would ask him, "Ralph, what happened to you? What happened? We've got all these boys to feed and you could not bring home a dime?" And I remember he would mumble something you could not understand, or he would curse my mother out like she had done something wrong. And when he cussed my mother out, he made her cry. And when he made my mama cry, I looked at this dude with hatred. I hated him for being so weak. I hated him for being such a punk. I hated him for not loving us enough to bring home the money. I hated him for being an alcoholic. And I swore, as I grew up in that little apartment on 108th and Central, I swore I would never grow up to be like him. Never. And for the first 18 years of my life, based on that vow, on that resentment, I did not drink anything. But even while not drinking, I still suffered from what I've come to know as the ism of alcoholism. In the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, in the very front portion of our book, there is something called the doctor's opinion, where Dr. William Silkworth, who worked with the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous and contributed something that we put in our book, he wrote something that I really relate to. He said that he had studied thousands of alcoholics, and he noted they had certain things in common. One of the things he said was that they seemed to have what he called an allergic reaction to alcohol. When they drank, they seemed to crave more. But that wasn't what really interested me when I read the doctor's opinion. Because, remember, I didn't drink for the first 18 years of my life, but he said something else. He said these alcoholic men and women, when not drinking, seem to suffer from feelings of being irritable, restless, and discontent. That they seem to be not at ease with themselves, diseased. And I identified with that. Because even before I started drinking, I've always felt diseased. I've never felt as good as. I've never felt a part of. I've always felt like I was too damn short. Now, probably only the other short men in the room can identify with this. Usually the tall women say they